Good morning, students. Today I'd like to talk to you about reading and drawing bar graphs. We're also going to look at pictographs as well. Bar graphs and pictographs are primarily developed digitally now, but in books and in some classes you might need to develop them by hand. It's also really important, if you can develop them by hand, you understand how they're put together and how to interpret them. So there's a strong benefit to being able to build them. I also will teach you how to develop them digitally, but this will be great for you as well. So bar graph, a graph used to compare similar items using bars and different heights. All graphs must have a title. The x and y axis must be labeled appropriately. The numeric intervals on the y-axis must be in pattern increments, and they must be appropriate for the data that must be graphed. You must use a ruler to develop your graphs at all times. The bars on the line graph must be colored and presented in a neat manner. And if we were building a line graph, must be connected without the use of a ruler. We call it line of best fit. So we look at these bar graphs, a couple examples. You can see that we have a single bar graph on this side here, and then we have a double bar graph here. Both are used, easy to compare. We know that the taller the value, the taller the bar, the greater the value, the smaller the bar, the lower the value. And really interesting, if you look at the double bar graph, John, when he was without preparation, he was scoring in the mid-70s. When he prepared, he was at 90. And everybody seems to have that relationship as they're going through here, that the more effort they put in preparation, the better their scores worked out. The only person who had a very marginal difference would have been Peter, and Peter right here, just at 80 and just above 80. So he was the anomaly in the group. So if we look at this bar graph here, which category is highest on the graph? And according to this, it would be swimming for both boys and girls. So swimming would be our answer here. Lowest category, crafts, seem to be what people wanted to do the least. What is the scale? Well, the scale is over here, and the scale is increasing by 5. So scale increases by increments of 5, and it's consistent. Okay. What data is the graph displaying? Well, we're going to get that from here. The title should tell us that, and that's going to be purpose of graph. In other words, what do kids want to do at camp? And we can definitely tell what's displayed on each of the axes because we have the labels. We know that that's activities, and we know that this is the number of campers participating in those activities. So the purpose of looking at this is to make sure that you have the information on the graph so that someone can interpret it properly. It would be hard to tell what this was about without the labels on the X and Y axis or the title at the top. Also, if you were just putting the values on, we can't see the spread in terms of the scale. We can't see the spread as accurate. It needs to be at the same increments. 5s are great. Whenever you're building a graph and you're building it with a scale, going up by 2, 5, or 10, 25, 50, or 100, mimics our monetary system, and it's easy for people to figure out and easy for people to follow. Something to consider. It might not always work with the data you have, but if you can, go into those values for a scale, make a big difference. Again, when we look at the graph, these are things that need to be put on, okay? Both axes need to be labeled. You can see that here and here. So we're looking for the x-axis and the y-axis to be labeled. Needs to have an appropriate interval. The scale needs to have that interval. In other words, we need to be making sure that it's going up at the same amount each time. And all graphs need to have a title, okay? We need to know what we're looking at, okay? And the last thing that I would like to put on here for you is always use a ruler. Okay? Be neat, be labeled. So I put together some quick data that we could use here to build a bar graph. What's your favorite color? If we were in class, I would have surveyed the class and said, you know, what do you think of this, 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 and this? Made up this data. We've got 5, 12, or 5 red, 12 blue, 4 green, 2 yellow, and 15 orange. There's obviously not that many people in our class, but it doesn't really matter for what we're going to work with. Okay, so we're going to need those values moving forward. Now, to start building the graph, we can start with a title. So, favorite colors. In grade 7, 8. And then you can see that I've already got labels on for the x-axis, so colors, a number of votes on the y-axis. The other thing I can do real quickly is just go ahead and label, this is the y-axis, this is the x. 0 would be in the corner. Now I like to, when I put the colors onto a graph such as this, I like to give myself a little bit of space, a couple spots between. We have 5 colors we're going to put on. So, and you can list it down. So this will be red. This one will be blue. Sometimes easier to see it this way. Green. We have yellow. We have orange. Okay, now intervals going up the side. Again, I like to go by 5s if possible. And I like to go one interval above. Our range of data was 2 to 15. So I know that 20 is beyond what we need, but that's okay. So now if I go to start building my graph, I can do that. Red was here, and I can color that in if I want. All right. And one thing I like to do just to write above it that its value was, or I can write on it, but above it's fine, 5. Blue was a total of 12. So we're going to go up to out there. Now I had said to you, use a ruler. It's a little bit harder with this. I can use my ruler here actually. So I'll pull it in and be able to straighten these out just a bit. There we go. Now green. Green had a total of 4, so it's only going to go up to about here. Okay. And again, I can be putting, you know, there's 4, and the blue was 12. Now, yellow had a total of 2. Yellow was actually really low, so we're not going to get too high with it. Just about there. Okay. Two. And then finally we had orange, which was, and I don't have access to orange on this, but what we'll do is we'll get orange up to 15, and orange is quite high. So there's orange. Okay, So labeling the bars helps. We can see the spread of the data. We can see things organized effectively. Okay. Now, when we build a pictograph, it's very similar, but what we need is a graph title. Okay, we've already done that. There's a list of different items that's being measured in the graph, which is fine. You need to choose a symbol, though, for a pictograph to represent what you're displaying on the graph. For example, you can use a football to display the number of football players there are at each school in St. Catharines. The symbol you choose can represent a count of one or more. For example, each football might represent 5 players, thus displaying 4 footballs next to a particular school would mean that 20 football players attend that school. I would recommend showing the symbol and as a whole and then a half. And if you can, try to stay away from values that will give you decimal values when you put them in half. I'll show you that on the next slide. So in this instance here, we've got build a pictograph for the following book sales data. Okay, so if we put a title on this real quickly, we put book sale data. I've already got the books and the months listed in here, but I need a symbol. So if I was to go with a rectangle, such as this, okay, I could say that is 50 books. If I went with something half of that, that would equal 25 books. That would be a lot easier to just distribute and put out. So that way I know that I've got a half and it's not a decimal value. Because you can't have a quarter, like a 0.5 of a book, right? You have one book or you have one, you can't have a fractional value of a book. So August has 325 books. So that's going to be 6 blocks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's 6. That's 300 because each of them is 50. And then I have the small one for the 25. So there we go. 450 books. That's just going to be 9 squares altogether. Okay. So September was a good month for books. There we go. October was 200. November, now this will be interesting. So we're going to have 3 and then 3 50s. And then a 25. And 250 would be 5. Okay, and even organizing this implicitly, you can see that obviously August and September, by the length of the lines, tells us right away that there was a greater amount. Now, if I was to fix, and I'm going to fix August, this is something that can happen when you build it. I built it roughly, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back though. I'm going to make some adjustments because you can see that I've lined the others up as best I can. So these lines should mimic one another and line up as best as we can. Okay. There. It still shows the same value, and the only thing we would adjust is a little bit in here in October and November, but a little bit more neat and organized. The main thing is that when you're building with a graph, you understand that the information must be on it so someone can interpret it. In this instance, I know the months, I know how many books, and I know the scale being done in pictographs.